Tonight, we begin a new series here on RFL that we're pretty proud of. It's called When the Ends Don't Meet, Families on the Brink. It will focus on a problem we now see in every county, every town, every community in our region, and I would argue in our country. We are all familiar with the problems of poverty, of course, and homelessness. We see examples of that on a daily basis. It's not something that's easy to define, but obviously very hard to solve. But we also know about the relative comfort and security that is part of being what we thought of in the middle class. And even for people on the lower ends of the middle class, the American dream, we all believe, alive and well. But in between poverty and the bottom rungs of the middle class is a forgotten part of our community. And I think it's more people than we'd like to admit. These are folks who every day struggle to provide the most basic of essentials. I'm talking about home, food, clothing, health care. You know, the basics. Now, they're getting by, but they are one problem, one extra bill away from losing even what they have. It's a group the United Way has identified and called ALICE. People who work hard, make just enough to get by, but not enough to provide any real sense of security. And there are a lot more folks, as I mentioned, in this group than we'd like to know, let alone expect. According to United Way, between 31 and 44% of all households in this precarious position they find themselves in. They live, as I said, in every town, community, in our state, in our region, and as we've seen here in this recent election, you could argue, all across this country, red and blue states alike. Now, in the weeks and months to come, our own Andrew Whitman, he will be sharing some of their stories with you. And he begins with his first profile tonight. Andrew?
Well, Rich, we're going to introduce you to a woman named Rose Quinn. And ever since Rose was a young woman, she's had three passions in her life. Her kids, including her daughter and the two nieces she raised, art and teaching. And Rose has succeeded in each passion. Her girls are out of college. They've inherited Rose's love of art, and Rose has become an educator. But those successes haven't translated into financial success or security for Rose, who has been homeless, has scratched and saved to continue her own education, and done everything else she's supposed to do in our society. And yet she's still on the brink and could be just one bit of bad news away from financially slipping off the edge.
I expected that I would have a middle-class lifestyle for myself and my daughter. That's what I expected coming out of school. I didn't expect to remain basically in poverty.
Technically, 48-year-old Rose Quinn does not live in poverty. She lives here. A small one-bedroom apartment that's maybe 500 square feet. But it's hers and it's home. Last summer, she was homeless, sleeping on friends' sofas.
I'm getting by. I'm better than I was last summer. Last summer was kind of a crisis point. I'm able to pay my bills, and I'm able to pay the rent every month. I had to make a lot of decisions to live a more modest lifestyle, which is fine. I don't begrudge that. But I'm still living paycheck to paycheck. I still have no savings to speak of.
No savings at all?
No.
It is not for lack of trying. Rose works 4 different jobs, all connected to education. She raised 3 girls, her daughter and 2 nieces, and sent them to college. She sent herself to college, too, through much of her 30s. Using student loans and scholarships, she got her degree in education and graduated right into the teeth of the 2008 recession.
The jobs had just disappeared. I did manage to get a job working, teaching community classes, and even though it was full-time in the sense that it was certainly more than 40 hours a week, but it was hourly, so there were no benefits.
Under the artwork her daughter made, Rose shared her story with me. Much of that art reflects struggles and pains, and despite her smiles and laughter, so does Rose.
Barring maybe about 2 years, my entire adult life has pretty much been a struggle financially.
Rose had a solid middle-class childhood until she turned 16. Her dad worked for Pan Am. When they went under, the family opened a deli and lost almost everything.
My parents almost lost their home, and so at 16 years old, I was literally looking at homelessness as a possible reality.
Between 16 and 23, life seemed to pile on. Rose dropped out of high school but earned her equivalency. She went to college for the first time, but it did not stick. At 23, she and her longtime boyfriend had a baby, Layla. But before too long, Rose and Layla were on their own.
There were some job opportunities that came along that were financially going to put me in a much better position, but I was the sole person for my daughter, so that was something I always had to consider. Some people really did say, well, you know, you're a single parent and you're her sole provider and you don't really have the right to say that you're going to take a job that pays less money. And I saw it very differently. I saw it as, you know, she needs me, she needs the money, she needs the security, there's no question, but she needs me too.
So a few years later, Rose went back to school again, going for her teaching degree at SUNY New Paltz and working. For Rose, the work never stops.
Getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and studying for 4 hours before I started work and went to school, because I couldn't do it in the evening with Layla because I had to be with Layla and I had to make dinner and we had to do her homework. The struggle to pay the rent was a real struggle just about every month. You know, there were times when, you know, grocery shopping where, you know, we would get up to the counter and I would realize that we didn't have the money to get what we needed to get.
A few years later, just after she finished college, Rose's sister faced a medical crisis. So Rose took in her nieces, Mary and Anna, adding 3 times the joy to their home, but also 3 times the bills.
We ate a lot of cheap food. And when you eat a lot of cheap food, you know, it's not good for your health. And, you know, what are you going to do? You know, the kids come home and they're hungry, and ramen noodle is pretty darn cheap.
Despite the struggles and thanks to loans and scholarships, Rose sent all 3 girls to college and all have earned degrees. But they now face something Rose knows all too well, that the positives in life, like college degrees, often come with big costs.
$15,000 in debt at least. And that's good. We think that's good, that it was only 15.
Which brings us back home to Rose, who's only at home when she's not working one of her 4 jobs. In terms of months worth of expenses, how many months do you have in your checking account?
Months?
Yeah.
I have about a week right now.
You have a week?
Well, I have my rent paid, I have my bills paid for this month, but if something were to happen to my job tomorrow, if something were to happen to any of these jobs tomorrow, I would be facing homelessness by the end of the month.
Rose's 4 jobs take her all across Ulster County from her home near Ellenville. She gets there in this, a 1998 Honda Accord complete with holes and rust. It is her lifeline, despite the 250,000 miles of life it's already seen.
What happens when you're in such a precarious situation is things that shouldn't be a crisis become a crisis. A couple of months ago, I ended up spending over $1,500 on my car just to get it inspection worthy, and that was mostly exhaust issues.
That $1,500, that's more than 2 months' rent for Rose, now sitting in the driveway. When's the last time you had a vacation?
What do you mean by vacation?
Disney World, Las Vegas.
No.
Trip to Boston.
No.
Have you ever been on an airplane?
3 times.
When's the last time?
When Layla was about 6 months old.
What's the last thing you splurged on?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll do that with food every now and then. Like I'll buy myself lunch every now and then instead of making it. I only shop in thrift stores. So the other day I spent $12.50 on some new shorts and some, I think this shirt. Splurge is what you make of it. I don't have the money to splurge. I have to find different ways to treat myself.
As always, easier said than done for Rose. Another complication, her health. She has relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, the kind that pops up out of nowhere in intermittent attacks.
The problem is, you know, MS is like living with a sleeping monster. It can always wake back up.
You will have medical expenses from it at some point.
Sure, and I have in the past, and I will in the future, no question. And I don't have insurance right now, so.
She's had jobs that provided insurance in the past, and more recently she had been relying on Obamacare.
But I managed to make an extra $4,000 last year, and for the prize for that was being told that I was no longer eligible for any form of real subsidies in health insurance wise.
Your income rose just enough.
Just enough.
To cancel out or to
Yes.
cut you off from subsidies that would have helped.
Yes. And that's the story of my life, by the way. That's when you're in the middle, when you're in the low middle like that, that's the story of your life.
So for now, Rose will keep on keeping on, working, hiking and biking when she can, and of course working still more. For Rose, it is not a difficult life or even a frightening one. It is just life. Did you think it was going to be this difficult?
No. No.